more information or requests for audio files of previous shows, go to www.bobharden.com.
Thank you so much for joining us here on the show. It's brought to you in part by the good folks at Johnson's Air Conditioning, Naples' longest established air conditioning company, as well as Naples Illustrated, bringing you infinite luxury lifestyles. Visit the website, NaplesIllustrated.com. Coming up, we're going to visit with Dean Stansel, FGCU economics professor. Right now we have with us Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. Dr. Jasser is the author of The Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim's patriot's fight to save his faith. He's also the founder and president of the Islamic Forum for Democracy. Dr. Jasser, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Bob. Thanks for having me back.
Always a pleasure, Doctor. For listeners, I've read your book, The Battle for the Soul of Islam. I think it was just a fantastic insight into your faith as well as to understanding, giving a context for what's happening. Why did you write the book?
Well, after 9/11, people were wondering, what's in the mind of a Muslim, what makes us tick, why did we come to America, is there a reconcilability between Islam and democracy? And then Fort Hood happened, and now we've seen with the growth of ISIS just a huge increase in the fear against radical Islam, and people are wondering, are Muslims part of the problem or are they part of the solution? And I think it's obviously one of the two. And I wanted to do three things. One is introduce people to the way a Muslim who loves America thinks and how I was raised, and second, to look at how we got here historically, and third, to look at some solutions ideologically for Muslims and the only way to defeat radical Islam.
So radical Islam, I watched your documentary, The Third Jihad, very scary stuff, and it looks like it's happening right here on the homeland right now, what you predicted. Abdulaziz, I think his name is, the shooter in Chattanooga, killing these military personnel. Just wanted to get your thoughts and commentary.
Well, it's the same thing again, and this is much more than an act of terror. This is an act of war, and I say that because he attacked our soldiers, and they do this because they see this individual. We can't. This stuff about calling him a lone wolf just has to stop. It's not a lone wolf. This is an ideology that is virally penetrating the minds of those who adopt it, and these Muslims start as ordinary Muslims. They then become Islamists who believe in the dominance and supremacy of political Islam. Then they become jihadists that believe that there should be a military solution. And lastly, something gets turned on in which they think they need to act violently. This individual wrote a blog 2 days before he did the attack where there was nothing really violent in it, but yet it talked about wanting to establish Islam on earth and the fact that his role was to emulate his interpretation of the Prophet Muhammad. And he even wrote, he said, ignore the scholars who tell you this is wrong. This is something we have to do, is to establish Islam against the enemy. So, if we continue to use as Americans, currently our government uses a paradigm of countering violent extremism, which is individuals who espouse that they want to commit an act of violence. We would never have found this guy, ever. But if we say countering violent Islamism or just political Islam, then we'll begin to look at individuals like this, and he would have been on the radar. No different than in the Cold War. We weren't countering violent Soviet imperialism. We were countering Soviet communism, and we understood that the Communist Party, while it shouldn't be made illegal, certainly was a repository of many who could become used by our enemies.
So I appreciate your commentary and thoughts on this. Do you think he was self-radicalized after reading the Quran and passages in the Quran, or do you think that somehow, some way, he was influenced by contacts in Islamic jihad?
There is no self-radicalization here. These individuals are either radicalized by literature or ideology that they, he went to Qatar, went to Jordan. His family itself probably had a narrative about America which was negative. So, the bottom line is there's an entire ideology that they get swept into, which is not all about killing soldiers, but ultimately it's no different than saying, okay, what causes drunk driving? Not every drunk, not every person who drinks does that, but ultimately the intoxicant in his ideology is two things. One, significantly anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-Western. Second, a pro-Islamist, one that believed that Islam had to be the only way for guiding society, government, and law. And ultimately, he had many inputs for that, and finally had a probably interaction either while he was there or on the internet that told him that in order to get redemption, he had problems in his life with depression and drugs, and many of these individuals do have sort of a vulnerability that makes them susceptible to it, but that's not the problem. The problem is the ideology, which is political Islam.
Yeah, so Dr. Jasser, I mean, your organization, the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, is for the separation of mosque and state. How's that going?
Well, I look at the cup half full and that we're making a lot of progress. In January we put an ad in the New York Times that had 24 different organizations listed that believed that we had a responsibility as Muslims to, in order to beautify our faith, we need to separate mosque and state and defeat not only ISIS or that Islamic State, but all Islamic states, and that the evil empire of today is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and all these quasi-theocracies that vary from the fascist theocracies of Iran and Saudi Arabia to the so-called more benevolent ones like Jordan or Morocco. But ultimately, the fact that there hasn't been a increase in what the Arab awakening was trying to do, which is democracy and freedom, is a problem that we as Americans and those living in the West have an explicit responsibility to try to foster. And the only key is that same enlightenment that the West went through, that very American narrative that defeated theocracy, I think can happen in Islam if the West gets it around its head that this is the battle. The battle is not against all Islam, but it's within Islam against theocracy.
Thanks for clarifying, Dr. Jasser. Now, you mentioned Iran, and of course we've just, the president is pushing through Congress and attempting to has already pushed through the UN, the Iran nuclear agreement, and of course Iran is the sponsor of worldwide terror. What are your thoughts?
It's so frustrating as an American to see at every front the appeasement that's happening. Domestically, we're not labeling the ideology in order to solve it, and globally in foreign policy, we're giving away the farm in order to get a nuclear deal. When in fact, Iran's hegemonic desires in that region are not only about nuclear weapons, but we gave them the ability to get ballistic missiles. We handed them overnight. They're going to be getting in the next few months $150 billion. The last 2 weeks now have seen contracts for Shell Oil, Peugeot, and others that are going to begin to give them billions in cash. And if people think this is going to go to help their economy and help the people of Iran, think again. Iran is responsible for the genocide being implemented by Assad against his people with 7 million displaced, 400,000 dead, and ultimately this is, Assad is still there because of Iran. Hezbollah is terror globally. Iran is the number one state sponsor of terror. So, to look at this nuclear deal in the vacuum of just nuclear weapons, not only that, that we can't inspect anywhere, anytime. I mean, look at Iranian media. If you want to see what they got, look at Iranian media, and you will see that they're celebrating that they defeated the weak Zionist entities in the West, and ultimately they reign supreme per their verbiage themselves.
Yeah. Dr. Jasser, you're doing God's work. I mean, you're in Phoenix, Arizona right now. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, and you're here talking with us about such important issues right now. So we genuinely appreciate that. Your website, I believe, is afdemocracy.org? AIFdemocracy.org. AIF is American Islamic Forum Democracy.org. And also the name of the book, again, The Battle for the Soul of Islam. What a terrific read. I encourage all of our listeners to get a copy and read the book, The Battle for the Soul of Islam. Let me get the rest of the title here.
An American Muslim Patriots Fight to Save My Faith.
All right, Simon & Schuster in 2012. Doctor, genuinely appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bob. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure indeed. Coming up, what a great man. I mean, you have to understand the work that he's doing is not without peril. He is constantly getting death threats, you can imagine, from those that are pushing Islamic jihad, and those, the Muslim Brotherhood and so forth, are not happy with his message. You can be sure. Coming up, FGCU economics professor Dean Stansel, that and more, right here on The Bob Harden Show on the Bob Harden Broadcasting Network.
Stay tuned for more of The Bob Harden Show here on the Bob Harden Broadcasting Network.